Hi everyone, it's Elise from Kid and Cloud Colouring Classes, and today I'm going to be showing you how to colour a simple wax seal. Now you'll find the information on the colours I'm using in the description below the video, and I've also made just a basic wax seal image that you can do a little bit of practice on as well. Now this technique is a preview from our brand new colouring class, which is our April 2021 colouring project. Now, if you'd like to colour this one up with me, you can find the full class over at kidandclouder.com. If you're already a class member, breaking down your classes into smaller goals like this can be a great way to start if you're nervous or only have a limited amount of time. 10 minutes of colouring is all you need to make a start and to take a mindful break for you to recharge and de-stress. So let's go ahead and jump in. When colouring any object, it's important to first keep in mind light source. Now, light source is anything that makes light in our scenes, and it must be present for an object to be seen. It's what determines the light and shade on the object. So typically in our classes, we work with ambient lighting, which is a major source of light in a scene like the sun or overhead lighting, which casts a big cone of light over your entire project, rather than spotlighting or directional light, which is one side appears lighter than the other. Now, when working with ambient lighting, the light hits the parts of the object that are raised up toward those light rays, no matter what side of an object the light is on. And the areas that are further back, therefore, end up in more shadow. So when colouring an object like our wax seal here, we want to look at what's popping out toward us, which will be the brightest parts or the highlights, and which parts are curving or slanting away back down, and these are going to be the darkest parts or the form shadows. Now we don't really have many cast shadows to think about here, but we do have one, and that's below our flower. Now, the one that you're going to be colouring here today outside of class, you won't have that overlapping flower. You're just going to have the seal itself, so you don't need to worry so much about this. But another important thing that when we do our colouring, we do want to consider these cast shadows. So what that is really quickly, whenever I have something in front or above something else, the object below ends up in shadow. And that's because it's showing that distance between those objects. So even though you're not going to be doing this here today, it's still a really important thing to take away because it's the number one thing to create those depths and levels in your project. So in our class, the way we teach this is we've got that flower sitting straight over the top of the wax seal. So we're popping in and adding a nice rich shadow underneath to really show that there is separation between those two objects. So if I was going to be colouring our wax seal here today, so we're not worrying about that cast shadow, you've just got the entire wax seal itself, we're going to be looking at the different heights in the actual seal here. So you can see little things like this. This is where you actually get that little metal round and you push it down into the paper. So the wax sort of bubbles out from the sides of that. So right where that metal object gets placed down, you get almost like this crease line. So that's why you can see that this is a lot deeper and darker because it's an indent into the surface of the wax. And even if I hold my hands together here like this, you can see creating a little bit of a crease with my hands. Between my hands it is quite dark because I'm actually blocking those light rays from getting in, and that's showing that this material is actually curving in and down. So wherever we add the darker colors like this, think about the fact that we're blocking the light. It's ending up darker because it's further away from our light source. Same even in the imprint here as well. So we've got the little heart. That too is adding a bit of a crease. It's showing that that was part of the metal that we stamped down into the page. So that's ended up a lot darker and deeper inside. When we have these little bubbles of wax out on the side, we want to make them look like we've got little raised up parts and then it sort of goes back down. So almost like this undulating sort of motion. That's what creates a bubble effect. So we don't have part of an object looking like it's popping out without having the opposite, something that looks like it's further back. So again, you're playing with those levels to make it look 3D. So when we do this, a really quick and easy way to explain it is you've got these little parts here. Notice that these are curving away from the center of the object. So when it's curving away from the center, think about your light rays coming in and hitting those parts first, because they're popping up and away, so that as they pop up, our light comes through and hits over them. And these parts here curving back in, we're going to refer to them as like little valleys. They're further in, they're lower down, they're getting less light. So these little parts actually are going to be darker, and these little parts popping up toward us are going to end up being our little bubble shapes. Now you'll notice right on the very middle part of these little bits that are popping up, I've got a little bit of white. Now we want the wax seal to look like it's shiny. Whenever we color shiny objects, the way that our eye actually sees that is through a high contrast of color. So what I mean by that is really deep, dark colors in your shadows, bringing it all the way to white in your highlight area. The difference between those two colors on a value scale, so meaning from very, very light to very, very dark, because we're jumping between them, your eye registers that as a shiny element because it's got that stark contrast of color. So whenever you're doing high shine, we always want deep dark shadows versus bright white highlights. Even if you aren't using a lot of the shadow color or the highlight color, as long as you have that contrast there, it's going to read as shiny. So leaving them right on the parts that you want to appear raised up, or where you have a strong direction change. It's usually where that highlight will go on a shiny surface, because you want to think about not only the parts that are popping out toward the light, but where the light comes through and reflects back. It's that reflection that looks really white and shiny. So on the very top of these little bubbles, we've got that white shine. Then as we come in toward the middle here, you'll notice a few more little white bits. And that's because we've got little indentations which are further down, so that little crease that we were talking about. And right next to that, it'll pop up to the highest point. As it pops up to that highest point, that's where we get that light reflection that we were talking about. So it's that juxtaposition between the deeper, darker shadows and the brighter, wider highlights at those direction changes that is making that high shine and reflective quality. Now don't worry if some of the theories may seem a little bit confusing or overwhelming if you're new to learning about art. It's always the way whenever you learn anything new. That is completely normal. It just means that we need to practice it. The more we practice, the easier it gets and the more these things start to sink in. So let's go ahead and do some coloring, and this will hopefully all connect in together and make a bit more sense for you going forward. Now I'm going to start with a little bit of black raspberry, and we'll start in those little creases that we were talking about earlier. So the easiest place to start is just to come straight along this little crease at the edge here. This is where that metal wax seal is going to be pushing in, so you have that really nice, strong outline. Now from here, we're going to apply into the little valleys between these little parts that are bubbling out. Now you'll notice that I'm just applying this really nice and light at the moment. So you want to be able to build up the color in the page. So try and avoid hard lines, keep a really nice soft pressure as you colored, like we talk about in that coloring basics video. Now with the shape, I want to do a little bit of a heart in the middle. Now if you've got a lead pencil, you can do any shape or initials, anything you like in here. That's why I've left it blank, but I'm just going to come through and do a heart. So remember, it doesn't need to be perfect. There's so many different ways to draw hearts, but I'm just coming in and doing the basic outline here. Now, when you've done that, you can just erase it very, very lightly so it's still visible on the paper, but it's just really soft. Now, I've just done the outline. We'll do all of the coloring in depth with our colored pencils. So I'm just going to come in now with my black raspberry again, and I'm just coming along the outer edge on this left side. this is what I'm wanting to show. So this face of the wax seal is going to be just like a standard height, and then we have the darker color here because I'm showing a direction change. So I've got the standard face of the wax seal, and then I'm dipping down, and right where that direction changes here, we actually get quite dark along that point to actually show that it's dipping down and away from the light. So I'm just adding it down this left side. Now we usually don't do it on either side, because what happens on this side here is you do see sort of that inside edge. So what I actually do is I'm popping just a little bit inside. So notice there I've come inside that edge, and then I'll just fade this out with the lighter color. So it's a little bit lighter on the other side just because of the direction that we're viewing here. Now I'm going to do a few other little creases inside the shape as well. So just leaving a little gap and doing a little crease around the edge. These wax seals can often have multiple grooves in them. So we're just basically creating those levels. Remember, wherever you add this darker color, it's going to look like a little crease. Now, a little bit of a cast shadow beneath the flower, because that is sitting straight in front of our wax seal as well. So we really want to be able to show the difference in the distances here, those levels. Alright, now once you've done that and you're happy with everything, let's start to blend it out. So the next color I'm going to be using is my crimson red, and all I'm doing is popping straight over the top and extending a little further out. Now in these little shapes, notice what I'm doing is I'm coming up and extending the sides, these valley parts, a lot further than I am along the edges. That's because I want these edges to look like they're popping out toward us, so they're going to get a lot brighter and lighter than these valley areas. That way I can show some levels between the two different parts here. Now I'm also going to come straight through the middle. Now I'm trying to leave a little bit of white along that edge there. That's going to help me get a really nice highlight just before I hit this really deep crease. So again, I'm using my highlight to help that direction change be quite visible, and that's going to help me create that high shine. If you lose it a little bit, it's okay, because we can always add it back with something like a white gel pen. Now I'm coming straight over that crease line in the middle. And again, at this point here, we're coloring close to, but not right up to that line. Leave a little bit of white, and then we're going to do the same thing over here. So we're leaving little bits of white to help us get that white shine and reflective surface. The same right here as well, right next to where we have that darker level, leave that little slither of white. Coming inside my heart shape here now. Now I'm creating a sharp line along the edge, so I'm creating the edge of that heart. And you can do the same on this other side as well. Now I'm just going to do some really soft shading inside there, but notice that I'm not coloring the whole way up to the edge. I'm just joining it at the bottom here I'm going to leave the sides as those white pops of highlight, and through the middle I'm just letting that plateau because we're looking straight on. So when you look straight on at shiny objects, what usually happens is our eye doesn't really register a shine because we don't usually have a reflection straight towards us. It's usually going off on the angles where we have those direction changes. So straight through that middle area there, I'm allowing the color to just plateau a little bit. But it's on those sides where I'm picking up that direction change and getting that nice pop of shine happening. I'm just adding a little bit more shading in toward the sides. Now I'm just going to pick up a little bit of permanent red, and I'm just going to close in a little bit of the gap in these high areas. So I'm still going to leave a little bit of white. Okay, now once you're happy with those shapes, what I'm going to do is bring in my white pencil, and I'm going to come through those highlight areas and just over where the color has ended. What that's helping to do is just flatten down the tooth of the paper. And it really makes that white stand out. Now you want to make sure you come through the white first rather than over the red, because what can happen is you may make the highlight look a little bit pink or a little bit muddy. Try and avoid this, but if you can't avoid it, it's okay, because we can always use little tricks like our white gel pen, as I mentioned before, to help those highlights come up even brighter and sharper. And you can also come through these little side parts just to soften that transition down. Now that's one round of the blend done there. Now when I do my blending with pencils, after our first round of colors, you probably have all of these little white speckles still left in your coloring. This is a really good thing. This is the tooth of the paper. And what this is showing is whenever you have the little white speckles left over, it means that there's more tooth that can be filled with more pigment. That allows you to really build up the depth of that color. If your paper is really smooth and you don't have any tooth left to grip any more pigment, what you may find is you may get lines between the color, and the color may not come up as vibrant as you like, especially when you start working with complex blends that do have quite a few colors used in them. You really want to be able to build them up seamlessly. So at the moment we have those little white speckles showing through, so we want to come through and start to flatten them down. And the way we do that is just by repeating everything again. Now instead of using more pressure, what we actually do is just do a smaller stroke. So still keep it nice and soft. That'll keep your lines seamless between the colors. You won't get those hard lines this way, but it means that you will be able to flatten that tooth as you go. So keep it soft, but a smaller stroke, just focusing on flattening that tooth down. Now, to help you do this, you do want to make sure your pencil is nice and sharp. A blunt pencil is a little bit harder to get into that tooth in the paper. So you can just give it a quick turn in the sharpener and that'll just bring it up a little bit more for you. Next color in my blend is my crimson red, and again we're just doing the same thing now. Straight over the top, don't increase your pressure, keep it nice and light. and permanent red. Just finishing off toward those highlights. Try and leave those little pops of white if you can. Okay, now using your white pencil, you can come through those highlight areas again just to make them pop out. Now, again, if you want to enhance your highlights, you can use a white gel or paint pen. I've got a Uniball Signo, so you always want to make sure that you have something like this in your stash. Now, the gel pens aren't always the best. Sometimes they can skip, especially if you're using a waxy pencil like your Prismacolor. What you can do is grab even a white paint pen. My personal favorite is the Molotow marker, so it's Molotow. And the reason why I like this is it comes even in like a 1mm super fine nib. So that's really, really good for adding in detail over your pencils as well. But all you can do here is see how I'm coming through, and you can emphasize some of your white highlights. Now, if your gel pen starts to skip, what I do is I just scribble it out on a blank piece of cardstock. I've even got my pencils cover, my pencil paper cover that I usually use, and it will just free it up from the wax so you can color a bit smoother with it again. You can just add this wherever you want that little bit of shine to come through. And that's our wax seal all finished up. So we've actually learned a lot of theory already just in this one part of the tutorial. So we've gone through a lot of light source, we're working with shiny objects, we've created those levels and movement already. I hope you've enjoyed this quick lesson on how to color up a wax seal. You can try this technique on any images you may have and with any color blend as well. And these fundamentals are giving you the skills to help you apply to all different images. So always refer back to the slide source and the theories that we're going over. But remember, coloring takes time and practice to learn, so your results may not be instantly the same as mine or others, but the more you practice, the easier it gets. Even if you don't love your result today or you feel you've made a mistake, this is a lesson to learn from and you've grown today, so give yourself a pat on the back for taking that next step. If you'd like to color the rest of this image with me, please head to kitandclowder.com to view our new Botanic Notes coloring class. It's for sale until May 14th and you'll receive lifetime access to do this class at your own pace. I'll be breaking down all the very basics in this class, and it's a really great one if you're brand new to coloring florals, so don't be nervous at all. The techniques you'll learn are really quite easy even for those of you just starting out. We never have any lock-in contracts or timeframes with our classes as well, so I just thought I'd note that there. So I hope you've enjoyed this lesson and see you next time. Happy coloring!